The Kremlin, meanwhile, says a neutral Ukraine with its own army could be a compromise as the war enters its 21st day. But what exactly would that look like? Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo is at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Maria, what would that look like to Europe, and what would that look like to NATO if Ukraine is asking for security guarantees in that scenario?
Well, Kayleen, that is a big question, of course. When you talk about neutrality, what does it mean? It really depends who you ask. The term and the definition for the Russians, of course, has been very clear from day one. They talk about denazifying the country. They talk about a major clampdown from the Ukrainian army. And of course, they also say it should not and should really do that on a written basis, never join NATO. When you speak to the Ukrainians, they tell you a very different story. Of course, they want to still keep a military presence. They say we can perhaps not join NATO, but we would need international security guarantees from neighboring countries. I would include, of course, Russia, but also Turkey, potentially the European Union and the United States. So you see there is a lot of hype around this word neutrality, potentially as a way forward to end this war. But the definition around it is very, very unclear, and it really depends who you ask. The other thing we should note, of course, is that every time we've spoken with the office of President Zelensky, they've also made it clear that they are not going to do a repeat of the referendum or the memorandum around Budapest, in which the country just gave away its nuclear weapons for protection, and now they find themselves in a war. This is something the Ukrainians repeat all the time. We're not going to give everything away for nothing.
Chuck Schumer in Washington, where we've just come from, speaking to Anne-Marie, talking about the idea that the US Congress will be supporting the bulking up of NATO, Maria. When you talk to people there in that building, how do they see NATO evolving from here? What kind of a force do they see NATO becoming post this conflict?
Well, you know, Guy, what is clear to me, and of course we've been in here at NATO for the entire day speaking to different officials, what's clear is that, A, the number of troops on the ground is going to increase, particularly on the Eastern Front. We heard from the Secretary General Stoltenberg, we have 100,000 already units that are on high alert on the eastern flank, and they're also going to be sustained over time for longer. So this is really going to shape the face of NATO when it comes to, in particular, the eastern flank. We're talking about Poland, but also Romania, the Baltics, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. All of this is going to see an increase in the operations, but also, as I mentioned, deployments that are going to be extended in time. A lot of this has already changed in many ways, defense around Europe.
Latvia, headline just crossing the country in talks with its allies over providing missile defense systems. We'll get more on that story as it develops. Maria, thank you very much indeed. Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo joining us from NATO headquarters in Brussels. Let's get a view now from what is happening on the ground. Bloomberg's Aggi Cantrill joins us now from the Polish-Ukrainian border. She's been talking to the people that have been arriving across that border. Aggi, we continue to see the shelling of key cities in Ukraine. What are those that are crossing the border telling you about the situation that they have left behind?
So, Guy, having been here for a couple of weeks now, the thing that I really see that has changed is that the people leaving Ukraine at the start of this war were just trying to get out. If they already had contacts, they knew people, they had family or friends in neighboring European nations. That is not so much the case anymore. There are still people who have those contacts, but there are also a lot of people coming from places like Kiev and Kharkiv that have actually experienced the shelling firsthand and are scared for their lives, and that is why they have left. And going back to Zelensky's speech to the Congress today, that he was making that clear connection between closing the skies to creating a no-fly zone and calling for that in the context of this humanitarian crisis, that is why the people are fleeing.
Yeah, and a reminder of that humanitarian crisis with the child crying behind you, Aggi. Are the people you're talking to hopeful that they are going to be able to return home? Do they have any confidence in the prospect of a peaceful resolution at some point?
A great deal of the people I'm speaking to do hope that this is a temporary solution, and that's why for them right now, especially for the Polish authorities, Poland, remember, has already taken 1.8 million people into its country. What they're looking for now, when I speak to aid workers on the ground, is that they need to find places to transit these people to so that they are able to be housed and accommodated, because for a lot of these refugees, they really hope that this move is not permanent. They hope to be able to return to their homeland.